Today, I am going to do something a little different. I am going to clean and reset my money bowl while Alex and I talk about sympathetic magic
Oh shit, we're doing that.
and the strange idea
Hold
that
on. Hold
perhaps
on. Let me.
the things we
I need to
surround
figure out.
ourselves
I need to
with
grab
can
my
begin
items.
to shape the world
What
that
do I
we
need?
live in. Like begets like. Symbols are connected to the things they represent. They're like a vessel, or how a vessel is a home.
Well, I want to make a
Hold on.
goddamn bowl. We're making the bowls, aren't we?
Like begets like. Symbols are connected to the things that they represent.
But do
A
you?
vessel is but a home for
Right. It's that
intention.
you. Do you have? I'm
I
looking.
used to
trying make
mentor
sure
under
we go
a
through
warlock
here.
who practiced Palo Mayombe in Santeria.
How about this? Are you going to be describing in this episode items that you're putting in your bowl?
When you make some type of a spell jar,
Okay, then let me take like a $5 and write down.
you're believed to actually either invite or command a spirit into the vessel, or otherwise create a spirit that will inhabit the vessel. You nurture it, you feed it, you give it attention, you tell it what you want it to do for you. Honey jars were popular things that we did for some people. And in it, you fill a jar with honey, you do some specific things with it, and it will hopefully sweeten your life in the way that you desire. I've seen cow tongues with names sewn into them, buried somewhere with meaning to keep somebody quiet. It's amazing how effective something as simple as a petition, a piece of paper with an intention on it, is when stuck into the sole of a shoe. In other traditions, the combinations of things may still be spiritual, but in a more magnetic or energetic way. You know, like I said, like begets like. I think a really good modern version of this is a vision board. You make a kind of like a collection of things, a collage, if you will, that represent the idea that you want to achieve. Which also brings us to what's probably a more modern or secular interpretation, the psychological model. Seeing the collection of things subconsciously guides your actions to whatever the goal is. Then, as an extension of that psychological model, you can get really deep into how much your mind influences reality, whether it be a cognitive, subjective thing or some quantum hologram. By now, you see that we've caught. By now, you, by now, you may see that we've caught up once again to our oldest form of technology, symbolism. Symbolism. The constituent parts are all representative of the concept you want to achieve. So let's say, obviously, let's say we all want more money, right? Who doesn't want that? Alex is looking at me a little bit incredulously.
So I've made a vision board. It's in our bedroom right now. It had a picture of like an Arch Linux logo, a revolver, a house with a grill, my face photoshopped onto Kratos' body, a picture of some birds with a video game title, some cool Spec Ops gear, that kind of stuff. And as far as like results are concerned, I've achieved like 60% of the things on the board. So if I have an incredulous look on my face, it's more because of this quantum hologram thing you casually dropped with no prior warning. But yeah, I'd honestly agree with you that the vision board is just as much a type of magic as burying a cow's tongue as a manner of psychology. I assume what happens with the tongue is you just become much more attuned to when someone is not talking as opposed to your perception being focused on how much they do. Similar to how the vision board gives you constant subtle reminders that your subconscious can run its underlying machinations to try and make happen for you, or that you are more likely to keep in the foreground of thought and continue to just strive for actively. But yes, I want more money.
Yes, and that's what I guess we're gonna try to achieve today while we work on this money bowl. But this lets me slip into being able to talk about theories of modes of action for magic. So what you had just described is, I think I mentioned it earlier is what's called the psychological model, where the subconscious mind undergoes some type of conditioning, which alters your beliefs and what you can do, or what you do without you consciously realizing it. But there are 7 other models as well, which include the spirit model, the energy model, the information model, the cybernetic, the meta, the quantum, and the entropic model. And realistically, I believe it probably, however this stuff works, it probably includes a little bit of each one, which is kind of what the meta model explains, where it's really none of them, but any one of them is as useful as any other, trying to explain the phenomena or whatever that happens. So, like, personally, I think it likely starts in like a psychological mode, and from there, like floating around in your brain, it enters into the web of consciousness through the subconsciousness, kind of like a door, and that transmits this data through specific wavelengths, I guess. And I'm just using words that make sense in my mind, and it's probably going to sound wacky. And I think when your brain is kind of like transmitting those wavelengths, the larger universe responds somehow, but I don't know what the cause of action is, right? In the case of this type of magic, you're shaping your own attention and focusing it on an ideal that gets formed into a complete reality in and of itself. You know, whatever you do with enough attention is like throwing a stone into a still pond. But it's like you and I, or you and anybody else, are throwing stones into this pond all together all the time. And it's creating all these different little ripples, and they all respond together in some way. In the case of cow tongues, speaking from inside that reality tunnel, having seen it, the object usually becomes like a stand-in for the other person's tongue, so the target's tongue, or it is symbolic of the situation itself. So the tongue or the working becomes a vessel for the, quote, spirit of the idea, which somehow creates a link between the other person's ability to speak and the working that the brujo or the warlock did. And it may be that the warlock showed a spirit what to do, so to speak, as well, like more like a, here's this ritual I did, and it's like a instruction somehow. And then after it receives those instructions, it goes forth and does whatever it does. But that's kind of like from within that reality.
What are these other models? Like, what's the basic what's the basic idea behind these?
So the spirit model, that's, I guess, going to be your animist view, or more like, or your pagan view. It works because spirits, gods, angels, demons, ancestors, some type of intelligence, disembodied intelligence, is real, and then they can interact with us in the world around us. The energy model works by manipulating subtle energies or forces. So that's going to be your prana, your chi, astral light, things like that. The psychological model, again, is that magic works through the mind. It's subconscious conditioning. It's when we discuss and talk about archetypes, heavy on the altered states, big on the imagination. The information model, that one treats reality as though it is all about information and patterns, and that magic involves some type of transmitting, altering, or accessing information that is baked into the information of reality. Cybernetic, that's going to be your feedback system, where you can alter your internal state and behavior, which changes your interaction with the environment around you. And then that of course is going to feed back into you. The meta model, like I said, it's where like none of these really are objectively true. And this one will say it's just pick something in which to describe what you think the mechanics are, more or less. Like whichever one helps you grasp the idea to be able to perform. The quantum model is that magic is sometimes explained through ideas borrowed from quantum physics, especially observation, probability, and non-locality. This is generally, like, of course, this is going to be speculative, but this is one of the beliefs that I currently hold. And then last, you have the entropic model, which is that magic involves introducing or directing disorder or change into a system. And it is sometimes framed through the lens of entropy and the tendency of systems to break down or transform.
Okay.
So it really does run the gamut of mundane to like as woo or matrixy as you want to get it.
So you believe that it is a quantum thing that you are doing when you create your bowl?
I think so. I think it's like you're kind of setting out a bunch of magnets that are themed a certain way. And then you're also kind of baking that intention into your subconscious by going over there and playing with it and taking care of it and putting your awareness towards it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything I could say to really debunk it because there's not much that anybody knows enough about how the possible the lurking underneath parts of the world work. So consciousness is a complete mystery. So who knows how much you can actually interact with underneath the hood.
Yeah. And beyond that, like I don't know like what the practical explanations would be. I imagine it's likely kind of like any ritual. You're just kind of driving a point home. You're revisiting
if there
your
is
idea
a practical,
of repetition.
like if we're talking a scientific explanation for it, we are nowhere near close to having that, right? Because we don't understand why we are
Right.
experiencing, regardless of whatever explanations anybody wants to give. Their metaphysics explanations or religious or this, that, or the other reason, right? We don't know. Nobody has the proof of why that would work.
Yeah.
So then, and then further, we've already observed some weird stuff that just starts the way that it is, which is like your non-locality stuff, and Einstein believed there were hidden variables and how things would evaluate themselves when they were at a distance. The hidden variables theory doesn't currently work, and I think the Bohr model is what everybody talks about. But regardless, how does that, like, there's no idea how that works. It just seems to be the way that things are, right? And like, if you want to decide that everything should have a reason, then there would need to be a reason for why that exists, which means there needs to be some sort of underlying mechanism for how that non-deterministic thing becomes determinist. And then, okay, well, we don't have anything that can derive or figure that out right now, so it's kind of up to anybody's best guess. So if somebody wants to assume that the consciousness element, one of the bigger mysteries, has some semblance of interaction with another very large mystery, there's very little to go off of to suggest that there couldn't be any sort of connection.
In my experience, though, when you start playing with stuff in a concerted effort, there is you start finding yourself into like weird synchronicities, and it's like an unraveling of things that really would only make sense to you, and it's very hard to quantify. So it's like it is very much a rabbit hole, but it's something that you can only truly experience. Like you can tell other people about it, and they either believe you or they don't.
Well, I'd say, yeah, it might be tough to quantify, but I don't think it would be difficult to journal it or still record the data about it, right? Because The one thing that we do have going for us as people and humans is that, like, again, we want to go back to the whole we don't really know how everything works kind of situation is, I still, if I read a book and then you read that same book and then we can sit and talk about that book, we probably both experienced the same book written by the same guy, and it was the same words that we read, and so we could talk about
Yep.
the same ideas. Now, I maybe didn't picture the main character the same way you pictured the main character, but we still we still read about a guy named Sam, right?
Right.
I lost my train of thought. Hold on. Which is to say, okay, yeah, which is to say that if you are the lived parts of the lived human experience are shared, like things that I do and things that you do, we can talk about them and having experienced them maybe in our own ways, but there is still the core underlying experience to them. If I go out and ride a skateboard for the first time and you go out and ride a skateboard for the first time, there may be slightly disparate feelings that we will have, but we will have both experienced the feeling of having rode a skateboard for the first time, and there are commonalities in that. Some of them are concrete, some of them are not. Maybe it's the feeling of anxiety or elation or trepidation, or it is just the physical, item that is the idea of the skateboard, and whether you used like a longboard or otherwise, right? And then obviously the place where you did it is different, but you still need a surface that was comfortable enough for you to properly use it. And what I'm saying then with this is that the observations that you can make about the world around you as it changes, and you notice these synchronicities, is something that could be recorded, and you could look at them and try and isolate different aspects of what those synchronicities mean to you, what they actually are like objectively, and how they manifest it in whatever way. A synchronicity that could be as simple as me having, Martin saying that there were 7 different things, 7 different models, and then me and the dumb thing about the 7 different spices of Skyrim is a very trivial and dumb synchronicity. That said, the fact that happened in whatever sort of span of time between itself is kind of a little weird. Now, it could just be our human pattern recognition thing that we're doing, but at the same time, maybe it isn't. And so it wouldn't be a bad idea to track that kind of stuff and see if there don't end up becoming different patterns in that pattern that we're seeing already.
Now that we've established that what we all do in fact want is money by some means, we will start collecting the ingredients of our child of magic. Lon Milo Duquette eloquently pointed out that everything in life is sex, it's metabolism, you get the picture. We are collecting these things so that we can make a third other thing. We will take to our beds the maiden of creativity. The muse sings inspiration into your imagination. Just as you are a collection of constituent parts, so is she of her own accord. You are a combination of air, earth, and she of water and fire. Sorry. We want to find things that correlate to the goal, put them together, and express our intention. We take care of it, nurture it with our attention. We feed it things like incense and candles. The feeding, quote unquote, so to speak, is a ritual that directs your intention. The bowl is black to represent the all-containing element of earth, the physical and the active realm. I have rice to symbolize abundance, life, and the general concept of fertility. I keep the rice in this brassy or gold-looking container because, of course, I want my fertility and abundance to be rich. I put this container in the black bowl and then surround it with other little novelties to invoke the same concepts. I'll put money in, and I'll also take it out and kind of use this bowl as like a piggy bank to show that there's money always moving in my life. I've got acorns to grow my oak. I want to grow my wealth with long-term security. I mark the bowl with the symbols of Jupiter and Mercury. Both Zeus and Hermes are gods of wealth in their own status. Hermes is the god of communication, commerce, travel, and language. Having that influence, as well as the support of the storm gods who oversee expansion and abundance, is essential. The connections could even make sense to you. Whatever the thing is, before you add it to the jar, wipe it on the candle or whatever, just make note of the intention. Like, I'm putting this rice in to symbolize abundance.
Yoink. Whoop. I went and I did my own bowl and trinkets and things. Mine's not specifically a money related spell because I'm not as interested in money, I guess, but I have a nifty little penguin bowl that we got from Japan. And I chose that bowl because when I was in Japan, that was a very, I was very elated. It was very adventurous time, and it was a very relieving sort of time that was very free of anxiety. I have a 20-sided die that was one of my father's that
I didn't know that you had that.
I've got a bunch of dice from when he had played, so they're ancient dice. But I'm going to put the die in there, and I'm going to put it on 20 for critical success, but also so that I can sway chance away from this particular thing. The removal of chance by putting the chance in the bowl.
There you go.
Yeah. I grabbed a little coin thing. It is a token this is from Hershey Park specifically. I don't know how I still have a Hershey Park token, but I thought it was a Knoebels token. But this is to symbolize childhood and how much nicer childhood was, how much better of a mood and sort of wonderment one had in childhood. I have this Pokemon card that one of our friends had found at some point during a hike, and she found it and gave it to me because she thought of me when she got it. So I want to have that sort of nice connection there implied in here to show that there's to try and invoke the idea of like the friendship connection thing. And then I finally have, it's no longer stinky. It doesn't stink like the sea or anything. Because it was like an actual shell that a creature would have lived in. You can see one of these that Sabrina specifically found for me. That I'm going to put in there to symbolize, to include the symbol of the care of my wife, Sabrina, in there as well. So now I have my weird little anti-anxiety bowl spell.
I love that. That's beautiful.
I may not be as much of a good sport on some of the more woo things that end up getting talked about, but I can be thoughtful when I want to be.
It's just nice to have fun. At the end of the day, like, imagination is such a huge part of this.
Well, and like you said, the idea is the intention, right? Even if I was having fun with it, and that fun was not from a malicious place, that intentionality is still imparted into the bowl, and that's a positive emotion and a positive intentionality that gets put into there, regardless of, the nature with which it was put in.
Yeah, and then like, Again, at the end of the day,
And then I
like
do a
it doesn't
blood
fucking
sacrifice.
do the blood sacrifice. At the end
No.
of the day, you do the blood sacrifice, and then it doesn't matter. None of this matters once you do the blood sacrifice. We can talk about tag locks for a second. Tag
No,
locks.
I don't know what that is. We don't. No blood sacrifice. That's how you get diseases.
It's just when you put some part of you into the working itself. You could use spit, you could use hair, you could use skin, you could use blood, you could use other fluids.
Whatever you
Other
can harvest
fluids.
out of the man.
Yes. Also, like, I guess while we're here talking about symbols and things, we can talk about how even the day of the week can be important to your working. So when I do, just for example, if I'm doing anything to do with like wealth or success, anything to do with my like job or career type workings or aspirations, I typically do them on Thursdays, because Thursday is some variation of Thor's Day, as in like the god of thunder, Thor. In Latin, the same day is Jovis Diaz. Yeah, Jovis Diaz, named after the planet and the god Jupiter. So, for certain projects, though, I will work with Mercury. For certain projects, though, I might work with Mercury on Wednesday. That's the day of Woden, or Odin, the Allfather. The Romans again had their own name, Mercurii. The Romans would syncretize Odin and Hermes once they understood the deity's power over language and their ability to travel between realms. In my point of view, I am creating an incredibly complex system of symbolism with fairly mundane things that will begin to shape my world around me in some type of way, right?
No.
Container spells are just one way to express this type of magic. Another thing that one can do is by using candles. And you might scratch meaningful things into the candle. You may rub oils into the inscriptions that you make. Then perhaps you coat the candle in herbs associated with luck. Like you could use cinnamon. As the candle burns, the idea and intention that was put into making the candle is spent and goes somewhere else. The candle held part of your consciousness in some noticeable way, even if it was just in the form of your intention. As you burned it, you sacrificed that intention to whatever left the waste products behind. The waste products being the physical vessel of what was left of it.
Taking a look at this from the psychology perspective, is this just meant to create like a bigger imprint on your subconscious than just concluding to find a better job or ask out the boy you like? Because to me, it kind of seems like it harkens back to the vision board, but just with a different strategy. The candle is a more focused and acute instance of some subconscious tuning, while the vision board is meant to be a slow, reoccurring aspect.
Yeah, at the most basic level, yes. It's creating either one is creating a multifaceted imprint on your mind. And in a lot of ways, I guess you almost become devotional, if not just devoted to this broad idea or concept that you're building within the psyche. But what's interesting is that there's this overarching theme. At least I see it in the Western traditions. So everything from my ceremonial magic to this more witchy sort of thing that's echoed in these modern trends like the vision boards, is that you have to cease your lust for results. So you can't you just can't obsess about it. You can't want it, or you can't worry about them. Like once you do the thing, you let it go. You have to be detached from the outcome and or assume the emotional state of the object or the objective completed. And when I say like have to, quote unquote have to, I think it keeps the idea from sinking into this subconscious appropriately. And I think if it sits like above the surface of our consciousness too much, like in the ego, I think we taint it with different like neuroses and societal conditioning It's no longer, I guess, the pure emotion or the pure idea. It becomes this like, oh, I can't do this because I'm worried about it, or I can't do this because X, Y, whatever. So the idea never gets to metabolize correctly. So I think that's one of the benefits of doing like a really quick like petition or candle spell, is because you could do it and get it out of the way, or a bigger ritual. And then likewise, I think with the container spells, there's a point where like you work with them and they just kind of become their own entity or this own being and this own thing that you have in the background. And I think it becomes more like a background noise. I don't know what more we can say about this other than go play.
Feel free to not like overthink your items either, because I imagine that the overthinking process will.
Tell us about your bowls. Tell us about your magic workings and how you think any of this stuff works. So I guess with that, we are out of here.